All right, so we talk about retirement, how much they want to have, when they want to retire. Now, we haven't even gotten into any of this stuff yet, have we? But what's the most important thing for most people? Retirement. Okay? All right? So they get their home address, their telephone numbers, and we had a good discussion about their retirement and found out whether that's a priority for them or not. Right? And then we get down to looking at their dependents. You know, they get in their age and everything else. And the thing I talk about, and this is why we say college, yes or no. If they said they don't plan on their kids going to college, is there any reason why not?
My junior's too stupid. I've been told that.
Yeah, okay. All right, so you're not even going to worry about it? If he decides to go to college later? Well, I can't afford to send him to college anyway, so it's going to be up to him. Okay, I understand, but if you could afford to do something for him, would you want to do something? Okay, then it gets into a lot of other discussion. And that's what you want to do, is discuss what they would like to do for their children. You know, well, we'll worry about it when they get there. Okay, and you can do that. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. Well, let me ask you, if you're not there when they want to go to college, do you want to make sure that they have the money to go? Okay, then that's just a life insurance sale, isn't it? Okay, if I could show you how to put money away for college without taking any additional money out of your pocket, all right, would you like to be able to do that? Or would you like to know how? And so you get into the real long discussion about that. All right? Yeah, that's what all this remarks are about. And then it talks about employees, health insurance, and everything else. In what position? I mean, by the way, when I talk about their work, I'll ask them how are things going. Right? You've heard me talk about Brian and Heather. Okay, so this case, the smallest case I wrote that here. But I asked, how things were going to work for him, and he says, terrible. I said, oh, why? What's happening? Well, I work for my father. He's phasing out of the business, and my stepmother is holding the purse strings. We've got a real big opportunity to grow the business, and she just won't let me, won't give us the money to hire additional employees and everything. And he went on for 15 minutes telling me about what's going on there. And I said, well, how do you feel about that? Yeah, he said, I'm ready to pull my hair out of my head and blah, blah, blah. And he went on. And I said, well, do you ever think about a buy-sell agreement? All right? And, well, let me, before I said that, I said, let me ask you, what would happen if your stepmother or your father died tomorrow? And he just looked at me and goes, oh, shit. I mean, that was exactly what he said. And I said, why would that be a problem? And so anyway, he got us into talking about a buy-sell agreement, is what I'm trying to get at. But I wouldn't have found that out unless I asked him how things were going to work. And actually, at the end of, by the way, on all this, when I went back the next time and asked him if he talked to his father about the buy-sell, yeah, I did. He was all for it. We went to my stepmother. She didn't want to spend the money for it, so I quit. Because I went back to nursing. Thank you very much. He was really appreciative. He actually, my wife and I you've heard this a number of times. My wife and I actually ran into him about a month later at a restaurant, him and his wife, and he bought us dinner. That's how happy he was.
That's probably saved us, took us.
Yeah.
Because he'd have put more and more time, money, and effort into that business, and then in the end, the great witch of the West would have done him in.
Well, you know what the biggest thing was? No more stress. He says, when I quit and I went back to nursing, he says, what a relief. And he says, I didn't realize how much stress I was under. Every day, just trying to deal with the situation. He says, thank you. And his wife thanked me and gave me a big hug. And she was beautiful. Like that. Anyway, so we talked about that. But just as you go through and you're doing these questions and everything, you can see what you're trying to do is dig out any problems that they have. All right? Do they have health insurance? Do they have a retirement plan? Do they have a 401k? Are they contributing to it? So you dig it out through all, through every section of this, and by following this, you won't have, you won't miss anything. You just, because you got every section is laid out. For example, on the health insurance. Now, do you have any health insurance at work? What kind of deductible do you have?
Most people don't even know that either.
Yeah.
Do you ever ask them to have stuff like that ready before you go to their house?
Yeah. Sometimes it depends on the situation. If it is somebody that's already heard of me, it's a referral or whatever, then I normally will ask those types of, ask them to have their tax return and all that, or they come to my seminar. I'll ask them to have all their policies and their tax return and stuff ready so we can go over it, their investment portfolio, whatever. If it's somebody I've never met before, never heard of me, I got in by phone call or whatever, I'm just going to be happy to be there.
And what do you do when they don't have the info that you need?
All right. Well, if you look it up the next couple of days, I'll stop by and pick it up.
I keep a pad on the side,
Yep.
and I'll make a list of the things that I need them to do. And we talk about that.
Yeah.
You may not know or have everything we need today, so I'm going to keep this pad over here for something that we can't get right now. Instead of you going and digging for 3 hours up in the attic, I'll just leave you a list, and then in the next couple of days I'll drop by and pick it up.
Yeah, or they can drop it by your office or
Fax it to me or whatever, yeah.
Okay. That answers the question, Tony? Okay. Health insurance, by the way, how often do you use your health insurance, Tony?
Me never. My wife and kids, I'm sure.
Okay. So they're using it a lot?
Fortunately, no. And my wife goes maybe 3 times a year, 4 times, something like that.
Okay. So are you meeting your deductible or,
In my case, no.
Okay.
I've already done this.
Okay.
I'm high deductible.
All right. So now the question is, how much money would you save if you went to a higher deductible? Obviously, if a family is really using the health insurance and is going over the deductible every year, and it's saving them a lot of money, then you don't want to touch it. But how much better off would you be if you could, go with, if they're not using it and everything? Would you agree that, really health insurance is just for catastrophic, right? Do you really, if you're not meeting your deductible every year, does it matter whether you have a 500 or 1,000, or 2,000, or 5,000? If you have $10,000 in the bank, you can afford to go to a $5,000 deductible.
I look at my own situation. It's real important that you not assume that everybody would be better off with a high deductible. If in our case we went to a higher deductible, I'd be paying it every year.
Yeah.
We've gone into an HMO, not because of me, but my wife is at the doctor at least 2 or 3 times every month.
Yeah.
She has migraine, she's got neck problems, she's got back problems, and a lot of that's high dollar stuff.
Oh yeah, that's why I asked.
Yeah, so you really got to, you can't just assume that, I've heard people in our industry, everybody ought to have high deductible.
No.
No, sir.
There's no such thing as never, always, or everybody. Whenever you make that mistake, that statement, think what you're saying.
Now,
because it's not everybody's the same. Every situation is different.
But the way ours was set up, you could could tear me and her apart if I was, the situation was, then I ought to have high deductible insurance. I've been once in the last 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you need to look at whether, I mean, there are all sorts of ways you can look at what their options are at work. Where they're going to go with, if they're not using it much, could they save money by going to a HMO or, and so forth. And this is just good information for them, isn't it? Because nobody's really ever told them about that, or they never even thought about it. I mean, some people, a lot of people have $250 deductibles on their health insurance and they never use it. Why? How much money, if you're paying for it, if you're the one paying for it, why are you paying for a low deductible that you're not using?
I just raised mine and it cut my monthly payment in half. I'll probably lower it a little bit in the summer and start skateboarding again. Yeah, I guess some people are more accident prone than others. Right? So you usually just ask them how many times they've used it.
Yep.
How much will a little children? I mean, you really do. That's got to be measured and measured carefully. Was my
Yeah. Yeah. Then you want to talk about retirement plans. How much are they, if they have a 401k, how much is the company matching?
Actually, I have a question about the health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
When you're asking them this, what you just said here, how far back do you look as far as, maybe they didn't meet the deductible this year, but how far back do you go to try to figure out?
Yeah, you just ask them, in the recent years or whatever, have you been, used, or how many times have you met your deductible in the past, 10 years, 20 years?
You're not gonna have a crystal ball, so you don't know.
Right.
And that could change.
Yeah, that's right. But, unless they've had some major health problems or been accident prone or whatever, most people are paying for a high deductible when they don't need to be, aren't they? Now, and think about this, and you can say this to clients. Most agents, most insurance agents want you to get the lowest deductible possible. Why?
I bring
Yeah. Is that really in your best interest? They want you to, because they get the highest premiums, so they make the most commissions. But if it keeps you from getting what you need for retirement, saving for your daughter's education, by the way, personalize it. Saving for your daughter's education, saving for your retirement, saving for your family. Okay? Most agents will say saving for retirement or saving for education or whatever. Personalize it. For yours and Ellen's retirement. Before you personalize it and use their names during the presentation or in the fact finding, the more personal it is to them, isn't it? Most agents don't do that. And I'll say I'm one of them. I forget everybody's name. I'm terrible.
I have to keep looking at my sheet.
Yeah. That's okay. That's why you write it down.
Down in big letters up at the top.
Yep. Yep.
Just get a name card.
Okay.
Oh, my name.
So now you go through the homeowners, the auto, the health insurance, which you already did, and any other insurances they have. We were talking about the disability plan at work. If they're paying for it. Anything that they're paying for, you want to look at it. If they buy a separate disability policy or a separate long-term care policy, I talk to clients out there that got a long-term care policy and don't have a pot to piss in on my fridge. Okay? They're spending money for the nice things they have when they're not taking care of the things that they must have. What are the things they must have? things that guarantee that for the family, right? Right? They must have some type of retirement plan.
Should have an emergency fund, which almost nobody has an emergency fund. You can
Yeah.
ask them about it, they feel stupid.
Yeah.
Like, no, I know you do.
Yeah, well, as Phil would say, what do most people have for emergency fund?
Classic.
Yeah, right here.
The lottery tickets.
You know, the credit cards. Yeah. Okay, the problem is what?
You're paying 9% interest for that emergency fund.
18, 19, 20%? Yeah,
Or
yeah.
18%.
I just read something the other day. What, people have CS charges. What are they paying for an interest rate on CS?
3.8 on one version.
Excuse me?
It's not all at that rate, but the high one is 23.8.
It's actually 28.3.
Did I get them backwards? Okay.
Yeah, it's 2 point something per month.
Well, I was gonna say it was back in, I think, in the 70s or 80s, when they split, making more off their finance than they did
Yeah.
in retail.
People don't realize it the way they say it, and they don't call it an interest. What do they call it? A service fee.
Is that how they get around it because of the usury clause, I think?
Yep,
That's
exactly. And I just happened to read it the other day. That's the only reason.
No, it was 23.8 and that was bad enough.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the only reason I know it's 28.3.
They have two versions of credit, and on one side it's not that bad, it's only
Yeah.
about 19%.
Yes.
1960, I'm pretty sure.
That's why everybody pushes the you use your CS card.
They have the 25% off sale.
Yeah, that's
Figure
right.
that out though.
Okay. Any questions about this first page?
Time-wise, if you divide your appointment up, what percentage of the time is spent on this first page?
90%.
I can spend more time on the second page.
Well, I shouldn't say that, you're right.
But I don't do, well, first of all, this is new.
Yeah.
That wasn't on there.
Let's knock it on.
Okay. And if I go to the website, will that be on?
If you put it on the website? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay. You're right, I'm sorry, about 50% of this is going to be on the first page. Because this is really the overview of most of the stuff that people want, right? The whole thing takes about, when I do it, it's almost 2 hours to the minute. Internal clock, whatever it is, I can't seem to do it. When they come to my office or I have to drive to them or whatever, it always takes me 2 hours. It seems like. Now, there are ones that will go 3, 4, 5 hours. I mean, I've had marathon calls. My longest one was 10 hours. It was a great sale. Actually, I had 2 marathon calls like that. One was a CPA. Okay? And I'll tell you a quick story about that. The CPA, it was one of the first times I talked about refinancing. Anybody? And he said, no, it doesn't work like that. And so I spent about 8.5 hours going through it and showing them and really working out the numbers. And it was a great experience. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because once I got all done, because I knew it worked, but trying to prove it. And so once I got all done, there was no question. And when he got all done, when I got all done showing it to him and proving it to him, he says, God, I can't believe it. I never thought you'd be able to convince me. He says, this makes perfect sense. And you're right. Let's do it.
What did he keep arguing though that took 6 hours to explain?
A lot of different things. A lot of, really looking at the time value of money of this and that, whether it was, made sense, the interest rates and stuff. Now I could explain what it took me 7.5 hours or 6.5 hours to explain. I could explain in about 10 minutes. All right, but this was 20 years ago when nobody understood any of this. Now it's a lot easier. Matter of fact, if you notice that on every single one of our boot camps, we have, well, this one here, over half the oh, did you ever get a hold of Larry Howell, Jeremy?
Left message for him.
Okay. In every one of our boot camps, we've had 2 or 3 CPAs, don't we? In this last one, we had, what, 4?
4 or 5.
4 or 5 CPAs out of 8 or 10. I mean, you know, they're buying into this very rapidly. All right. So any other questions on this first page? Right. If you learn nothing else, if you start really asking questions, keep it in their language. You know, keep it in simple terms. Learn some simple presentations so they understand it. You're going to find that it's much, you know, when you get all done, you don't have to close them. They're closed themselves because they're telling themselves. And they want to buy life insurance. They'll buy anything that you recommend. I did a case just the other day. Well, actually it's about a month and a half ago now. My housekeeper wanted me to talk to a friend of hers that had was just divorced. Just divorced. 2 years ago she got divorced. And she needed to get her ex-husband off the mortgage. And she only made $9,500 a year, $9,000 in child support. I mean, she's only making $18,000. She went to banks and everything else, and nobody would talk to her. She didn't make enough. Right? No financial planners, no advisors, or anybody would talk to her. So, and she just didn't know who to turn to, who to trust, or whatever. So I said, yeah, send her in. Have her come. More than happy to talk to her and help her get it done. So we sat down, and she was very nervous. She was on the verge of tears the whole time. Whole 9 yards. She's what, 53, Jeremy?
54.
54. And so I went through it, talked about refinancing. It was $100,000 house, $120,000, whatever. She had $60,000 mortgage. She had $25,000 in credit card debt, or $20,000. She was getting a small inheritance for $5,000 and everything. So we talked about it, and about the situation. She was, her credit was good. Whenever she needed extra money, she'd find work someplace in order to generate the money, so she'd have she never got behind, wasn't behind on one bill with as little as she was making. So credit score was, what, 780 or something like that?
750 something, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that wasn't a problem. And we did a loan with no, I don't think we did an income verification on the loan.
There was no income.
And there was no way I was going to talk to her about a option arm or interest only. I mean, that was, she was scared to death just talking about refinancing. So no way I was going to go into any of that. Anyway, make a long story short, we actually ended up refinancing the home. She paid off all the credit card debt. It saved her, let's say, $400 a month on the credit card debt. And the mortgage payment went up by $120 or whatever. And so we saved her like $300 a month anyway. And we only took 100 of that, and she popped in 24,000.
24.5, yeah.
24.5. Now, and we put it into the indexed life, where she was so low on income, it was never going to be a problem whether we met it or not. She's never going to pay any taxes. She has no other retirement income. So we lump summed it in. Didn't care. She doesn't have to worry about being able to write off the interest on the mortgage because she's never going to pay taxes. She's never going to have enough income. So we met it, put it all into a tax-deferred vehicle, which you normally can't do if you still want to be able to write off the interest. And And she needed the life insurance anyway, wanted it, in case something happened to her, because she still has a kid at home and stuff. So she ended up with how much life insurance, Jeremy?
100,000.
Just 100,000. And did she keep her term policy with her? Yeah. And which is what, just 25,000 or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I wouldn't have thought about that.
Yeah. Because it didn't matter to
That
her.
doesn't make any difference, huh?
Yeah. So in this case, he is.
So used to working with these rules.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why you need to look at every situation, because every situation is different. So we lump summed it all in. The nice part about it is, it was a $5,000 commission. All right, by the time we put it all in there, you know, I mean, what everybody else would look at as not even worth doing, because she wasn't making any money. You know, all the things that you know, and yet I made $5,000 on it. Thank you very much. You know, I do one of those a week, you know, or 3 of those a week, all day long. And she'll send us some referrals and everything. She's very happy. I mean, the first day after I got done explaining to her, she was crying. She was so happy. She said, nobody's wanted to help me, and you've been so great, blah, 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 blah. And Jeremy ended up having to bring her computer in so we could fix it for her, and, you know, and all that stuff. But those are the good things, the good feelings that happen when you ask the questions.